Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Two Asian Blokes Podcast, a podcast where we talk about Asian pop culture, movies, TV shows, comic books, anime, music, video games, books, food, whatever we're feeling at the time, really. My name is Dan with a H, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Thavy. Hi, Thavy.
You're going to have to write a script someday. Breeze through it.
Get it smoother.
Every time we keep fucking up.
I should just pre-record a freaking thing. No, actually, I like it. I want to keep it loose.
You like the challenge.
Keeps me sharp. We could probably cut out like half of the things that I mentioned because it's just Japanese and Korean movies are all that exist in our
and bad remakes.
Bad remakes.
Bad follow-ups.
True.
But yeah, we're recording a Valentine's Day special. My favorite time of the year.
Well, this is going to be published a couple of days before Valentine's Day.
The best time of the year.
Yeah. Would you say that you're romantic, Thavy?
I would say that I am, but also Valentine's Day is just... I mean, I don't want to be like that cynical dude, but it is a very commercial holiday.
Yeah.
Every time I think of Valentine's Day, when I used to work in the restaurants, it's always just chaos.
Yeah, it's true.
It's
a bad time to be hospitality staff. I'll tell you that much.
Oh yeah, it's always
But I guess any holiday is a pretty bad time for hospitality staff. And
we were closed during Christmas. So.
Oh, okay. And yeah, any holiday is commercial at this point. So I guess
Valentine's Day is probably the busiest time of the year. And you have to micromanage a lot because it's not groups.
Ah, yes, you're right.
It's couples, so it's a lot of couples. And like, it's just,
You probably get a lot of tips though, right? On Valentine's Day. A lot of men trying to impress their dates, I imagine.
Yeah, a lot of bad sex jokes. I can remember. Well, this one dude, he took his date out, and I asked him, I was like, would you like to have some dessert? He's like, oh no, it's okay. Because when I get home, I'm going to eat her out for dessert. And then, I just awkwardly chuckled and took the plates away.
What was her reaction to that?
She just laughed as well.
Okay.
Valentine's Day doesn't mean much to me, but because it's Valentine's Day, we're shifting our focus to Korean rom-coms. Yeah, we decided to talk about these two movies.
There were a lot of films to choose from, I think. This particular genre, the romance genre, is pretty popular in Asian cinema.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I actually do quite enjoy like a good romantic film.
Romantic comedy film?
I do tend to enjoy the rom-coms in Asia much more than the ones from the West. I don't know, I think they kind of embrace like cheesiness a bit more. They're a bit more melodramatic. There's less emphasis on trying to be funny.
Yeah, I guess it's a different kind of humor. It's more like cutesy humor rather than like... I don't know, what kind of humor in Western
I mean, there's still that kind of cheesy humor, but it's like different. Well, for one of the first movie, before we mention it, it does have the one and only Han Hyo-joo.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I've been watching this TV series on Netflix. I guess it's a web series. It's called W, and it's basically about her. She's like a daughter of a webtoonist, and the webtoon kind of comes to life, and she goes into the world of the webtoon, and she interacts with the lead protagonist. And in the webtoon, he's like being convicted of like a murder of his family, and he tries to find the killer in the universe of the webtoon. But yeah, it's basically about the love, I guess, between her and the protagonist of the webtoon.
Oh, okay.
I really like the premise. Like, I like these kind of parallel world stories. I think they're very interesting. And I do enjoy the show. But, like, as much as I'm a stan for Han Hyo-joo, she's very, like, deathly adorable in the show. It's very K-drama. There's a lot of the K-drama tropes, which I can't quite explain, but, like, a K-drama addict would probably tell you. But there are times where, like, the show will, like, stall for, like, some very kind of like lighthearted humor, and then you can tell because the music will like shift to like kind of like carnival music. I guess.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
it's a bit out of place, but it's just because like it's aimed at people who like that kind of stuff, and it kind of sours the show a little bit for me. I still haven't finished it yet. I haven't binged it, so I only watch bits and pieces of it here and there. When I feel like I've watched too much heavy shit, I'm like, yeah, I'll watch something that's a bit light.
I think that's my main issue with K-dramas in general is there's a lot of hand-holding in terms of the show telling the audience how they're supposed to be feeling.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
It's not very nuanced, I guess.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But I guess you're not really watching it for that.
Sure, yeah.
I guess the first movie we'll talk about is The Beauty Inside, which stars, Han Hyo-joo as the love interest.
Yisu.
The story is about a guy, I guess a guy, named Woo Jin.
He was born a guy.
Basically, he wakes up as a different person every time he falls asleep. And like quite literally anybody. He can be a Korean woman, a Chinese guy, American dude, Swedish dude.
So he still retains his brain. So on the inside, he's still Woo Jin, but his exterior can be a different person.
It's a very, very interesting premise. It's billed as a romantic comedy, but I would call it more of like a romance fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, romance with supernatural elements, kind of something like the Lake House, or
it's more like in the magical realism subgenre, where it's basically like there is a supernatural magical premise, but it's quite grounded in reality. The supernatural aspect is not focused upon. You never find out why he changes. That's just how it is. It's based off a
web series,
a YouTube web series, with Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
I saw that, and it sounded very experimental.
It's pretty interesting. I'm not sure if you can still watch it.
Have you looked into it at all? Because it sounds very interesting. Like,
I haven't looked into it too much. It's not that easy to find.
So I guess my understanding of it is that it was developed on the web, but there's a lot of audience participation.
Yeah, I think there's you basically have to look at the Twitter posts and the Facebook posts, and I think they play a part in the storytelling.
Yeah, it seems like the audience has a chance to play the role of the protagonist in a way.
Yeah, that was the idea behind it. It's actually a pretty interesting...
Very high concept, right?
Yeah. Wasn't interesting enough for me to read the Facebook post and look into it. So I guess the Korean adaptation placed it in a more conventional or easily digestible manner. It's a good film. I enjoyed it. Part of that is my bias to Han Hyo-joo.
Yes.
Because I know that they made a TV series of this.
I think that's on Netflix, actually.
I'm probably not going to watch it. I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, there's no Han Hyo-joo. Like, wow. But yeah, I enjoyed the movie. I really like the color grading for this film. It has that very soft lighting and slightly washed out colors. So it has this kind of very dream-like look. It reminds me a lot about Shunji Iwai movies. I really like this color palette. It's got that dreamy melancholy to it.
That aesthetic, when coupled with the narrative that is kind of set around a furniture store or furniture designers, it kind of reminds me of a Muji commercial. Yeah, have you ever seen a Muji commercial?
The director was a director of commercials before he made this film. So I think he'd been on some fairly prolific films. I think he worked on Old Boy as a set designer or something.
This is
along the lines.
Bike.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but this is his first.
We're probably not.
His debut motion feature film. Right?
Yeah. He hasn't done anything since this one. Yeah, he had a career in making commercials, directing commercials. So I guess you probably picked up on that because it does look like a very nice looking furniture commercial. It's interesting how you were saying Woo Jin was basically born a guy. Because you see so many actors playing this one character of Woo Jin.
I found that very interesting because Korean films, they kind of bank a lot on star power or recognizable names being in their film, So the idea of a protagonist that is just always shifting appearances, so you can't really say that it's starring any one actor as the protagonist is quite interesting, I think.
Baek was saying that it was very difficult to direct.
Because they're all playing the same person. Yeah.
They're all playing the same person, but each actor has their interpretation of Woojin. So it's a big part of like the physical manifestation of who Woojin is that day is almost like a different character. Because there's a scene in the movie where he is basically a 10-year-old boy going on a date with Han Hyo-joo, you know.
Yeah.
He's supposed to have an adult mind, but he doesn't appear like an adult at all. He's still talking like a kid.
Yeah.
And
she sneaks him some alcohol, and because
and he gets drunk.
got the body of a little boy, he gets drunk very quickly.
And even when he plays like a Japanese person at one point. And I knew that actress before. I've seen her in some films. I think it was Judy Ueno. She was in like a pretty sad romance movie called Rainbow Song. But yeah, like even just being Japanese just kind of changes it, I guess. But yeah, there's a number of actors that I recognize, but I wanted to throw that question to you. Like, did you recognize any of the actors?
Yeah, I mean, I know their faces. I mean, they're like the soccer coach from My Name is in there.
Kim Sung-ho,
yeah. I know some of them, mostly from like Running Man appearances, I think. Like Park Seo-jun is in there, I think. Park Shin-hee here as well. Oh, Lee Dong-wook is there. Oh, and that guy, what's his name? In this movie, he's the most handsome version of Woojin.
She
the one introduces at the party.
Yeah.
Lee Jin-wook, yeah.
Yeah, I think I recognize the same. I knew the actress that portrays Woojin during the confession scene, Chan-wook. She's a really good actress. She was in a movie called Hung Gong-ju, which is kind of a pretty heavily themed movie set in a school, which is probably enough said with that. But yeah, there's also the I think her name is Go Arang, and she was the daughter in The Host and in Snowpiercer as well. Explaining the movie a bit, it's quite grounded, and much of it explores the complications of Woojin's condition, you know, like psychologically, how does that take a toll on you in a relationship?
Sure, and even in just day-to-day living, like you see a lot of aspects of his life that he has to have adopted to adjust to this lifestyle. Like he wakes up and he might be speaking a different language. He wakes up and sometimes his eyesight is different. Like he needs to get glasses for himself. His shoe sizes are different. The types of skincare he uses, it changes. So his house
is different.
His house is just a mess of items that are for random body types and physiologies. So it's a very interesting concept. And you were talking about the romantic side of it. So how it affects his love life. And his friend and his mum are the only two people that know about his condition. And his friend starts a furniture business with him. And it's an online business, so that's how he's able to operate without anybody finding out about his condition. His friend is pretty kind of blasé about the whole thing.
Well, there's a scene where like Woojin has basically turned into Park Shin-hee, and he talks about wanting to sleep with him.
I mean, they have fun with the concept. I appreciate that because it is an interesting concept, but it is also a funny thing to think about. Like, what if you knew someone that did have this affliction, or what if you were somebody with this affliction? How would you function as a human? I guess it all culminates when he meets Han Hyo-joo's character, Yisu, and falls in love with her, right? At first, he kind of almost stalks her from afar because every day, because she works at this furniture studio and he happens to be shopping there for parts for his furniture. And he falls in love at first sight with her. And every day he goes to the studio as a different customer and like gets to know her little by little, with her like not knowing that she's actually talking to the same person. So
what do you think about the the actual meet cute moment when he decides, I'm a hot guy now, I'm going to ask her out? Do you think some people would see that as cute and some people would see that as creepy?
Well, I definitely think that him looking like Park Seo-jun helped a lot.
Because you know, obviously it's a film. Like if it was Kim Sang-ho asking her out, she'd be like, "Security," you know.
Yeah.
Because
it was very awkward. It was an awkward exchange.
Yeah.
It was an awkward date until he actually managed to lure her to the factory where he makes the furniture. It was really awkward. Even the way he looked, like he looked really handsome on that particular day. But even then, I feel like any sane woman wouldn't have gone with him to a secondary location.
I guess it's like for story's sake, you know, and the way that it's filmed, like it is presented in a cute manner with with Han Hyo-joo and was it Park Seo-jun, as you said?
Seo-jun?
Was his name?
Yep.
Seo-jun, yeah. They're like, you know, it's a pretty typical romantic moment. I just wonder, like, if this movie, basically, if it was an American film, if some people would be like, oh, no, that's, you know, that's creepy. But, like, how would you make a movie like this? I guess you kind of don't really think about it. A lot of the film, you really need to suspend your disbelief, like, because you got to start thinking because he's driving a car, how's he going to get his driver's license around? How's he going to like do all this and that? But the movie doesn't dwell on that, and it shouldn't, because that's just not good storytelling.
Sure. I mean, he ends up migrating to a different country, right? But you wouldn't be able to do that without a passport. And you wouldn't be able to get a passport if your face changes every day. Yeah, there is a bit of suspension of disbelief involved.
The leads, which there are many, they are all like good. None of them come off as awkward. And I think with the interesting fact that there is a different person playing Woo-jin, it does change the chemistry with Han Hyo-joo's character, Yisu, I should say. She is great in this movie. Like she does this role really well.
This is her in her element.
But in this, compared to the other show that I was talking about, she doesn't go as over the top as W does. Like she has moments of anger. She's not just completely super cute, even though, like, you know, I don't mind watching that. But I think just the look of the show I was talking about before just adds to the cinematic value of the movie. It's a pretty easy watch.
Yeah, I think so. I found it maybe dragged a little bit.
It's a pretty long movie.
It's kind of a K-drama thing, I think. Like, there's a lot of you know, just long scenes where they're just basking in each other's love, I guess.
That's the entertainment value, the swooning over each other, I suppose.
Yeah.
I didn't mind it in this movie. I've definitely seen, like, when you watch K-dramas, they're like
it's
hour-long.
It's nowhere near as mind-numbing as some other K-dramas that I've seen. Because it is a film as well, so it's a lot tighter than, you know, a K-drama TV series. But yeah, like, it is pretty entertaining. The conflict as well that arises is pretty interesting, I think. Like, because they focus more on the toll it takes on Yisu's psyche, I think.
It's interesting. They kind of shift protagonists in this movie, because it's kind of a spoiler. But we've kind of already spoiled it, haven't we? There's not really too much to spoil in this movie.
I think we're fine.
Well, I think in the second act, it's mostly trying to get Yisu and him explaining who he is. After they start dating, it's the kind of fun and games moment. But then there is a toll. Like, how are you going to hang out with friends? You know, people are like, oh, I want to meet your boyfriend. Who is he? For example, the party scene, there's like a function and she's like, yeah, I'm going to bring my partner. And he wakes up as an old woman. And it's like, oh, fuck. All right, go to sleep.
Sure.
And then he wakes up as the most handsome Korean person ever, very conventionally.
I mean, it was just a matter of time, right?
But there is that toll. Like, you don't know who you're going to wake up as. And it eventually affects Yisu's mental health. She has to start taking pills. But then it switched, because most of the film is narrated through Woo-jin's perspective. Until he decides to break it off with Yisu for her safety. And then it switches to Han Hyo-joo. I think they call these kind of movies like dual protagonist movies. Because usually when you watch a movie, you will have a sole protagonist. You might have another character or actor who could be considered a lead. but the movie would usually revolve around one protagonist's arc with all the B plots and whatnot. But it seems in this one that it's kind of both of them do have an arc.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of hard to do.
I think, particularly for romantic films, that kind of thing does happen a bit more than other films.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about The Lake House again.
Which was a remake of Il Maire,
sure.
if you remember that.
Yeah. In a romance or romantic comedy, like either the male or female lead could take the role of the protagonist. I think it's not uncommon for the movie to kind of flick between the two. I think even The Notebook does that.
I haven't seen The Notebook.
You haven't seen The Notebook? Oh,
no, I haven't seen
Thavy.
it. I know it's the chick flick, which is probably why I haven't watched it.
It's good, man. It's one of those films that made me tear up. But again, I think that's just something to do with like elderly people just hit me in the feels.
I'll watch it someday.
But getting back to the beauty inside. Like the focus on Yisu, after they break up. It's also interesting because I guess she realizes that living without him, I guess, is worse on her psyche than living with him. But at the same time, she does seem like she's getting better without I guess it's superficial healing.
Yeah. The message of the film is not that subtle. I mean, it's in the title, but it is interesting the fact that she does actually get better. She stops taking pills. Her life continues as normal. But what is like a normal life? Like, does anybody really want a normal life,
Sure.
Because people like conflict, I mean, it's why trolls exist on the internet.
It's why our Cowboy Bebop Netflix review has the most views out of any of our videos.
And how our Tiger review is not. But that's all right.
Did you find that the conflict, so like her mental health issues that arose from dating Woojin, did you find it was a bit too normal or a bit too grounded? Because she started having problem with her job, yeah, because she had this boyfriend that had like a problem. But that seems like something that anybody could suffer from, because everybody has trouble juggling a relationship and their career when they're first getting into a relationship. Because, your instinct is to always want to be with your new partner, and you tend to neglect like other things in your life.
Yeah, that happens with Woojin as well.
Yeah,
because his friend is like, where the fuck is all the furniture that we ordered?
So their issues in their relationship, it didn't seem like it had that much to do with his particular condition. To me, it just seemed like regular couple stuff. And
maybe.
I found that was a bit of a weakness in the film.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it. I think maybe what it was trying to say is that, like, regardless of his ever-changing face, it is still just another issue to deal with. And that, like, people will deal with love probably in a similar manner, like people can relate to dealing with love in that manner. But I didn't really think much about that. Just too busy watching Han Hyo-joo be absolutely adorable.
I bet you're glad that she wasn't the character that changed.
There's a bit where, because he records himself every day as a different person, and then when Han Hyo-joo starts like jumping into the frames of the laptop recordings. I was like, oh, that's very cute. And then and then I put a gun to my head. And
I just remember that one of the guys that plays Woojin is the puckered lip guy from...
I was going to say, I don't know the actor's name, but
Kim Hee-won.
Oh, yeah. For context, how would I explain the context? In The Man from Nowhere, the main antagonist of that movie is kind of like a very ratty guy, and the actor who plays him has like really puckered lips. And we've forever dubbed him the puckered lips guy since the 11 or 12 years we've seen that movie.
Yeah.
But I've seen him in a lot of stuff. It's like,
Yeah, he's pretty prolific in Korea, Kim Hyo-won. And yeah, if you haven't seen Man from Nowhere, you should check it out because it's a cracker
we're
of a
definitely
film.
going to cover that. We'll have to cover that.
One of the greats.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest action films ever made. But yeah, Beauty Inside.
Were you satisfied with the conclusion of this film, the ending?
I mean, I wasn't super blown away by the ending of the movie, but I think it was a fitting end. Like for a pretty, it is a fairly light rom-com movie.
Yeah, I'd say so.
It's not a very heavy movie.
No.
It's quite easy to watch. It's definitely someone you can take your partner to go and see and not have any traumatic events or it's definitely something you can watch with your partner, and it's also a very interesting premise as well.
Yeah, I did enjoy the premise, and I enjoyed the execution of the premise as well. I think it would have been difficult with so many like people playing the protagonist, and even from an audience perspective, being able to follow that kind of narrative where the lead is just constantly changing appearance. I think the execution of that was done very well. Like, I never felt lost at any point. I always knew who Woo-jin was on screen, which, I guess it's no mean feat. Yeah, I feel like maybe it lacks a little bit of substance, but it was one of those films where I heard the premise, I was like, that's really cool, but where are they going to go with it? And then when I watched it, I was like, it felt a little bit like they didn't know where they wanted to go with it either at points.
Well, I think what they set out to was to make just kind of a cute...
It's just a light watch, I think.
It doesn't have the most substance, but I think...
it's got Han Hyo-joo, and that's enough for you.
With me talking about it being a well-told story with pretty good cinematography and a cool color, that's all just bullshit. And just like, because it's like, oh, if you like the story so much, why don't you watch a TV series? I'm like, nah.
So something's missing from the TV series. I can't quite put my finger on it. Something's missing. Good furniture in it.
I definitely recommend this movie.
Yeah,
much easier watch compared to our next film.
What's the next film, Thavy?
So the next film is I'm a Cyborg, but That's Okay. This is the one and only romantic comedy directed by Park Chan-wook.
So far.
He's the Korean director. For people who don't know, he directed Old Boy, one of like the finest films.
Basically put South Korean cinema on the map, right?
Yeah. He's probably like the David Fincher of Korea, if I was to make a comparison.
I think that's fair.
For Old Boy, he was copying Seven, which is David Fincher. He like blanched the film script in like bleach or something to give it like a really washed out look. But anyway, that's Old Boy. This movie is a rom-com, and I remember when this came out.
Was it before Old Boy or after?
No, this was after Old Boy.
2006, right?
Yeah, Old Boy was 2003. And I still remember this movie. I remember reading buzz about it back then, and I was like, oh, Park Chan-wook, really? A romantic comedy? And I didn't watch it for a fair number of years. I think I only watched it for the first time maybe in the past 4 years or so. But it is very much a Park Chan-wook film.
Yeah.
It's definitely art house cinema. You can see a lot of the color palette of this show for people who have watched Squid Game, that indie little hit that no one has heard of. You can see a lot of really strong primary colors. And I think Park Chan-wook had pioneered that look for Korean cinema, and the dark humor as well. So the movie is about like she's basically a factory worker who suffers from mental issues. She's taken to like a mental asylum.
This is the main character, Young
the main
Gun,
character,
played by Im Soo-jung.
Yes, who's from Tale of Two Sisters. She plays Sumi. She's also a great actress. Yeah, she basically thinks she's a cyborg, and I think this is from trauma from being separated from her grandma. But yeah, basically she thinks that the doctors and nurses are all bad people, and she thinks she's a cyborg and she needs to like kill them and recharge her batteries. Her main counterpart to the film is the legendary
Korean pop sensation Rain.
What was that clip that we used to throw around a lot where like it's like the guy hold me on happy and it's like
I think it's from like
it's like they're dancing.
Oh yeah, it's from a really old variety show.
Rain was basically like the BTS of that era. You know, he could be like a pioneer of, was it the K-wave that was bringing Korean entertainment to
Yeah, he
West.
was in the same era as people like Boa, Seven,
Finkel,
yeah,
or Lee Hyori, I guess.
Yeah. But he was maybe the biggest solo artist at the time.
Yeah, I think so.
And
yeah.
probably one of the first to kind of transition into mainstream acting, I guess.
Yeah, he's been in some Hollywood films.
Just a multifaceted, multi-talented individual.
Yeah. He does really well in this movie, actually. And I'm not sure if it's his first acting gig. It isn't, right? He was in that K-drama, wasn't he?
Yeah, I feel pretty sure he'd done dramas before. What's it called? Full House was probably before this, I feel like.
I would say it's one of his first roles, and it's quite a quirky role. He basically plays a kleptomaniac. Yeah, his character is quite interesting. He, like, steals people's abilities or something.
He's almost like a hypnotist, right? He convinces people that he's stolen their abilities somehow.
Yeah.
He steals one guy's ability to play table tennis really well. Because the whole show is set inside a, what's it called?
Mental asylum, mental ward, I guess.
Yeah. Psychiatric ward, right?
Yeah, psychiatric ward, yeah. Whatever, it's not going to get us cancelled. Yeah,
I was trying to tread carefully there. But yeah, so he's convincing all of these mental patients that he's stealing their abilities, which is, an interesting character trait.
There are a lot of very colourful performances in this film, and a lot of, like, background extras that really bring the world of the film alive.
Sure, it's a bit One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of well-shot frames in this movie. That's no stranger to Park Chan-wook's films. Actually, it would be his first film to have a theme of romance, because you could argue that Thirst has romance in it as well. That's kind of another dark
Even
tale.
Oldboy,
but,
right?
Oh, yeah. But yeah, like as a straight up rom-com, it is not like, for people that like rom-coms, they wouldn't like this movie.
It's not a conventional rom-com. It's not a conventional film.
Yeah. The main conflict is it Yonggu or Gung-yong?
Yonggu.
Her conflict is that her psychosis of her believing she's a cyborg is that she won't eat. So in reality, she's deteriorating. But there are a number of like really cool fantasy sequences. Her character is often like listening to this radio, and there's like basically a voice that's telling her what to do, telling her that she's a cyborg. And there's a moment where the voice is illustrating to her these 7 sins. Because it wants her to kill all the doctors and the nurses. And the way that they tell these sins is through the storybook illustrations. And I thought that was a very like nice touch, because it does give the film this almost like a Lewis Carroll feel to it. It felt very like Alice in Wonderland, would you say?
It does. And there are a lot of fantasy scenes, because the film is told from Young-gun's perspective for the most part. So when she believes she's a cyborg, and when she tries to use her cyborg abilities, there's always an initial hallucination, I guess you'd call it, where she can shoot bullets out of her fingertips, or where she's recharging her batteries, and they're all done really in this kind of surreal but really pretty way as well.
Park Chan-wook has a thing for bugs.
He does, doesn't he?
Yeah, there's a scene where she's being transported by this giant ladybug after rubbing these shoes together with that scene is funny. Like, one of the characters, I don't know, one of the characters convinces this other character that she can fly if she rubs the shoes together, and it was just a really funny framing. It's hard to explain.
It's a pretty funny film.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of, like you said, dark humor in it, and the way those scenes are shot also add to the humor of it. And the colorful cast of characters too.
Yeah, when the movie first came out, it wasn't that well received. I think he'd just been coming off the back of Old Boy, because people were saying it was too light for what it was, but also too dark because of all the themes.
Well, apparently it did really well in its first week, but then I guess word of mouth got around and it dropped off dramatically in the second week, because it's a strange film. Like, if you're going in it expecting another Old Boy, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
If you're going into it expecting a rom-com, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about the romance aspect of this film. The chemistry between, I'm just going to call him Rain, Rain and Yong-gun, it's not immediately romantic, and you wouldn't even say it's romantic for most of the film.
I have to tell you, Thavy, 3/4 of the way through, I remembered that we were doing a Valentine's Day episode, and I questioned your choice of movie.
Oh, yeah.
I wikied the movie, and the poster is Rain and Yong-gun kissing.
Yeah,
so I was like, okay, I guess it does get romantic.
Rom-com.
It does have a very rom-com. I guess it was marketed as a rom-com.
Yeah, that's probably why people were disappointed.
But it doesn't get into it, the romance, until quite late in the film. I think.
Very. But when it does get into the romance aspect, it is like surprisingly sweet, because most of the interactions is Rain's curiosity for Yong-gun. Even for a Park Chan-wook movie, it is quite surreal, because it doesn't really have a solid structure, because it does focus on some of the other patients and like some of their struggles. You could say that it's a little bit like it does lose a little bit of its focus.
It does, doesn't it? There are parts where like a side character's story is introduced and then you kind of forget about it, but then it's resolved in just like a 1 minute scene towards the end.
Wait, who is this one?
There's like a love triangle between the big lady, Gokdan, and the two people that like singing. Yeah, that's kind of introduced very briefly, and then it's resolved very quickly as well.
Yeah, because
it's not even resolved, actually.
No, I don't think it is. Because there's that scene where it's very much Sound of Music.
Yeah.
They're like on the hills.
It's very random. It's quite a random film.
If you are an art house cinema fan, you definitely enjoy this movie, because it is quite a visually pleasing film. And I think a lot of those scenes, they probably were unfocused, but like I think just the
They're
way
like
that
non
it was shot.
sequiturs, I guess.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to Amelie.
Yeah, that's it. I was going to make that comparison. Yeah. It does feel very much like Amelie, for sure.
And the whole art house vibe of it as well, I guess, lends to that. But yeah, the romantic element of it, I guess because the two leads, Yong-gun and Rain's character, Il-sun, because they both suffer from mental health issues, I guess there was a part of me that was like maybe disconnected them from the romantic element, even though I knew it probably was going to lead to that. Like, their actions and stuff are just so erratic and random that it doesn't leave much room to connect them in that way. And yeah, I guess the fact that she thinks she's a cyborg doesn't help either.
I guess the romance factor of it is kind of subtle, because like when eventually there is a scene where they do kiss, and there's like, you're watching a romance movie, by the way, kind of moment. The conflict of Yong-gun trying to eat is kind of resolved when Rain, he basically takes like a pendant of I think it has his mother's picture in it, and he makes up this little gadget, and he shows Yong-gun like, this is like a compactor that turns rice into electrical energy. And the scene where they're kind of just sitting under the pipes in this kind of basement-ish area, it was like quite a cute scene, because most of the movie is is just so erratic, you know. And we've literally seen Yong-gun in a fantasy scene, like, gun down innocent doctors and nurses. And it's a pretty violent scene. Like, this is a surprisingly violent movie, and I shouldn't be surprised that it's violent because it's Park Chan-wook. But when this movie came out in Australia, like, yeah, it was billed as a rom-com. It only had the M rating. But I was like, when I watched it, like, you know, there's like suicide themes. There's that scene where she guns down all these people.
And when you think about it, like, her murderous intent is real. Like, she actually thinks that she needs to kill these people. So, you know, if given the means to do so, she would have done so in like an instant, you know?
Yeah. It's
pretty dark stuff.
Yeah. But eventually, like, you kind of see the roots of her trauma, which I don't think she ever really resolves in the film, but you can see why she's that way. Basically, the doctors are trying to get to the bottom of it, but it's like her grandma, who was also having a bit of a mental breakdown. She would only eat pickled radishes or something, but she listens to this radio that Yong-gun has made. And I think her family were getting fed up with her. They saw her, like, just as a burden, you know, like, let's just chuck her in a mental hospital. And, like, Yong-gun is really, like, traumatized by this because she sees, like, all the doctors and nurses just take her away. And her family smashes the radio that she's been listening to. And it could be, like, you know, much of Asian culture's denial of people with mental disabilities or mental struggles, whether that is prevalent in the movie. Like, I kind of just know that just as general knowledge. But, yeah, it's interesting that she doesn't resolve really anything because she still thinks she's a cyborg by the end of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, Rain doesn't really resolve anything either.
Is it kind of like this open-ended, like, look, I will kind of look after you for the rest of your life? But, yeah, do you think Rain's actions are justified? Do you think they're helpful or good, what he's doing? He's basically just making... Because it's like, it's not morally good, but it's helping her survive.
Yeah,
you know?
Essentially he is tricking her into surviving, right? Like the whole installing a quote-unquote rice energy converter into her. Like, he's, you know, playing into her delusions, but in order for her to continue eating, you know, and survive. Yeah, it's an interesting one. In his mind, his actions are justified because, you know, he says on a couple of occasions, you need to survive no matter what, kind of thing. Morally, I mean, the doctors as well are just trying to do what's best for her. I think they are trying to help her. I think it kind of crosses a line a little bit when, like, ironically, when the romance comes into play. Yeah, especially at the end, I was a bit like, is that... I don't know how to feel about that. I guess we can talk spoilers.
Yeah, go for it.
At the end, basically, she kind of figures out that her purpose in life is to be a nuclear bomb, and she needs 20,000 or something volts to explode. So Rain and her go on an excursion out into the storm together to see if she can get hit by lightning.
You missed that. You missed that golden opportunity, Dan. I'm disappointed.
Right, okay.
You missed a golden opportunity. Let's end this podcast right
now. Well, they go out into the rain together. And yeah, they try to get her hit by lightning. But obviously that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I'm still laughing at Rain in the rain. Sorry. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, and then the movie kind of ends with, I guess it's a sex scene? I don't know. They get wet, they get soaked in the rain, and he says, you know, it's not just...
She clearly got soaked in the rain.
They take their socks off because they're wet, and then he says something like, you know, it's not just our socks that are wet. And then, the camera pans out to, like, a beautiful... sunrise / rainbow, and they're like making love, I guess. But she still thinks she's a cyborg, right?
I think a lot of Park Chan-wook movies end on a morally ambiguous ending.
Sure.
Which is why it makes it a very Park Chan-wook film. Because I didn't really know how I felt about the ending, because it's like, is this just going to keep going on? Like, sure, it's resolved in a sense that he is basically tricking her, but like, yeah, like, is this the right thing to do? But she is staying alive because of what he's doing, you know? Because you see with what the doctors, they're just kind of like, as you said, the doctors are just trying to help, but they're also just like...
They're just doing their job, yeah.
They basically kind of look at her like, you're a moron. And they're just like, you know, you can kind of see that with the shock therapy scenes, which is like pretty... It's like, yeah, it looks painful to watch, you know, just like convulsing. But with Rain, like, I think it comes from... I think the trickery comes from a place of genuine concern.
Yeah. I think his treatment is a bit more heartfelt, but he also has mental health issues, so he doesn't really know what the right thing to do is either.
Yeah, all of like Park Chan-wook movies are about, you know, ambiguously moral actions. I mean, like, you've got the fucking Vengeance trilogy, you know, that's all about having revenge, you know, and the repercussions of it.
I wouldn't say it's a happy ending or a sad ending. It just ends, I guess.
Yeah. It's open-ended. Like, it's not going to please a lot of people because nothing is essentially really resolved.
They're still in the mental health institute. They're still got the same problems, except that she is eating now, which is a positive. But they're also in this weird relationship that's kind of based on lies.
I don't know. I think this kind of film is like, you are there to watch it for like the cinematic aspects or the filming aspects of it, as in, like, you know, the art house.
Yeah, and it definitely achieves that. I think it's a really fun watch. It's visually appealing, and the comedic beats are really good as well, and the performances are quite good too.
Yeah, but this is definitely a film where if I showed it to a random person, it's like, that was weird. And that would be all I would get from them.
It's not weird, Thavy.
It's not weird, but like, it's... Because I would say, like, yeah, for sure I would recommend this movie, but I'm not sure if...
You wouldn't recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everyone. On this podcast, we're obviously going to focus on a Valentine's Day film, which is a film that you wouldn't watch on a Valentine's Day, probably.
Yeah, I don't think this is the ideal film to watch on Valentine's Day.
The beauty inside is much more the Valentine's Day movie. But I wanted to, like, have one that was pretty light and then one that was, like, super wacky.
And it is billed as a romance/rom-com.
But, like, I don't think any of the films today are rom-coms. Like, they have humorous elements. But, like, yeah, that's the thing. Like, when you hear rom-com, you've got, like, a particular film in mind. Like, a lot of people just slap the label on some pretty, like, good movies, you know? And it's just like, maybe this movie is romantic and it has comedy in it, but it's not, like, you know, a rom-com.
I think there is a stigma to the definition of rom-com.
Definitely.
Yeah, like you think of,
even
like,
I was still wince.
Like Vince Vaughn, like, pops into your head, and then you just, like, get
Vince Vaughn, Katherine Heigl,
Jennifer Aniston,
Ashton Kutcher.
J-Lo. Oh, there's a really bad looking J-Lo film coming out soon. It's got J-Lo and Owen Wilson in it. I saw the trailer for it.
Oh, I think I saw the end. Yeah. Let's not talk about that on this podcast.
It's horrible. But yeah, those are the things that spring to mind whenever somebody says the word rom-com, right? Yeah. But it's not really that. It's quite a there's quite a spectrum of films, I think, that fall under this category. And the films that we've talked about today, I think they're not something that you could remake with Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston. You know, like, It's not...
Maybe Josh Brolin, yeah?
Yeah. Maybe. Let's not talk about that remake.
But yeah, I think that's about as much as I've got to say.
They're definitely worth checking out, especially
films.
if you want a more unconventional romantic film. I think these two films...
Yeah, definitely.
I think even these two films are on different levels of unconventional.
I think the beauty inside is actually quite conventional, but the premise is unconventional. Whereas I'm a Cyborg is like super
weird.
super whack, super weird. But you know, I love these weird movies, and I like art house cinema. So I like if I was going to compare the two, I'd like I'm a Cyborg more, but that's just due to tastes, whereas the beauty inside is probably the easier watch.
It's more crowd pleasing for sure.
Yeah.
And it's got Han Hyo-joo in it, so
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Definitely,
and a bunch of male actors that are quite handsome too. So
yes, so next year you can look towards the other Han Hyo-joo romance movies that I've got laying around. There's plenty. That's just going to be a running theme now. So we're just going to cover all of her movies.
Every week will be Han Hyo-joo week.
Yeah, she's probably going to get a restraining order against me.
Yeah, no doubt.
At some point. FBI, open up.
All right, guys. Yeah. Have you seen either of these films? If you have, what did you think of them? Do you have any other romantic gems that we should look out for in Asian cinema? And I hope you're having a good Valentine's Day as well. Or I hope you will have a good Valentine's Day in a couple of days. You can get in touch with us at 2asianblokes@gmail.com, or you can join our Facebook group to be part of the conversation. We also have an Instagram account now, so you could follow us at 2asianblokes. If you want to see what we're up to. Sometimes we put just little previews of what the next episode is going to be about, as well as stuff.
Basically, what Dad gets up to in Sydney.
Yeah, basically at the moment, we'll try to we'll make it more varied.
Yeah, I'll try to actually post interesting stuff. I'll get into the landscape of social media.
Neither of us have used Instagram very much, so I mean, apologies in advance for making Instagram faux pas along the way. Follow us, it'll be good.
Do follow us. And thanks for listening. And
as always, yes.
Even with my cynicism, I hope you have a good Valentine's Day. Give us a follow, and we'll see you all next time.
Okay, guys, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.